In the heart of Europe, Hungary is quietly but decisively shifting its alliances. Once a model EU member, Hungary is now forging strong ties with China and the BRICS bloc, challenging the Western-led order that has shaped Europe for decades. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Eastern opening is more than economic outreach. It's a strategic pivot that questions the EU's unity and future. While most EU nations seek to reduce dependence on China, Hungary is welcoming massive Eastern investments, often in direct opposition to Brussels. This move is driven by a mix of history, economic ambition, and nationalist ideology, as Hungary seeks greater autonomy in a world of giants. Is this a pragmatic strategy for survival, or a risky gamble that could leave Hungary isolated? As of late 2025, Hungary stands as both a bridge and a wedge between East and West, creating a unique and tense dynamic within the EU and NATO. In this video, we'll explore Hungary's historical ties to the EU, the drivers behind its eastward turn, the economic data, and the global reactions. Ultimately, we'll ask, what does Hungary's pivot mean for its future, and for the cohesion of Europe itself? Hungary's 2004 entry into the EU was seen as a triumphant return to Europe after decades of Soviet rule. Early years brought optimism, EU funds, and deep integration with Western Europe, especially Germany. The partnership was built on shared values: democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Hungary modernized rapidly, adopting EU laws and participating actively in union institutions. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Economic reforms were painful, and some Hungarians felt Brussels overrode national interests. Discontent grew as prosperity failed to reach everyone, and the relationship began to feel unequal. For a decade, Hungary's political elite agreed on a Western future, with alternative alliances barely discussed. Yet, these early strains set the stage for a dramatic pivot. The consensus that Hungary would remain a committed Western member made its later shift all the more surprising. The seeds of divergence were sown early, even as Hungary embraced the EU. The 2008 financial crisis and Viktor Orban's 2010 rise marked a turning point in Hungary's EU relationship. Orban's government imposed special taxes on foreign companies, clashing with Brussels and signaling a willingness to defy EU norms. Sweeping constitutional changes and new laws drew sharp criticism from EU institutions, who accused Hungary of undermining democracy. Orban framed these disputes as battles for national sovereignty against an overreaching Brussels. The 2015 migrant crisis deepened the rift, as Hungary built border fences and rejected EU refugee quotas, fueling animosity with Western leaders. The EU's Article 7 procedure against Hungary in 2018 marked a complete breakdown of trust. In this climate of conflict, seeking new partners in the East became a strategic imperative for Budapest. In 2012, Hungary launched its Eastern Opening policy, aiming to diversify trade and reduce reliance on the EU. China quickly became the centerpiece, with Hungary signing on to the Belt and Road Initiative and welcoming major Chinese investments. Hungary often breaks EU ranks on China, blocking critical statements and positioning itself as Beijing's key partner in Central Europe. Beyond China, Hungary has deepened ties with Russia, especially in energy, and joined the Organization of Turkic States as an observer. Interest in the BRICS bloc has grown as Hungary seeks alternatives to Western-dominated institutions. Budapest leverages its EU and NATO memberships to attract Eastern investment, while using these new alliances to gain leverage in disputes with Brussels. Critics warn this balancing act risks undermining Western unity from within. Hungary's eastward shift is backed by hard numbers. From 2015 to 2024, exports to China more than doubled, and imports nearly tripled, making China Hungary's top non-EU trading partner. China is now Hungary's largest foreign investor, with over $10 billion pledged in 2023 alone, mostly in EV battery manufacturing. Major Chinese firms like TATL and BYD are building gigafactories, turning Hungary into a key node in Europe's green supply chain. The Budapest-Belgrade Railway, financed by China, cements Hungary's role as a logistics hub for Chinese goods entering Europe. While the EU criticizes these projects for lack of transparency, Budapest sees them as proof of its strategic importance. Hungary is embedding itself in Eastern supply chains, creating jobs and growth, but also new dependencies. As Chinese firms dominate key sectors, questions about economic sovereignty and vulnerability to geopolitical shifts grow. The Eastern opening is now an economic reality with profound implications. Hungary's pivot is rooted in a drive for national sovereignty and economic growth. Orbán's government sees a multipolar world where small nations must be agile, building ties with all major powers to avoid being sidelined. The strategy follows global growth by attracting Asian investment and becoming a high-tech manufacturing hub. Eastern partners like China and Russia offer investment without conditions on rule of law or media freedom, giving Budapest political space and validation. This partnership of convenience helps Hungary counter Western criticism and assert its independence. Domestically, Orbán's stance against Brussels and high-profile deals with the East reinforce a narrative of strength and sovereignty. This resonates with voters who value national identity and are skeptical of global institutions. The image of Hungary as a key player on the world stage consolidates political power at home. The EU's response to Hungary's pivot has been frustration and strategic anxiety. Brussels sees Hungary's vetoes on China and Russia as threats to EU unity and credibility. Billions in EU funds have been withheld over rule of law concerns, but this has fueled anti-EU sentiment and pushed Hungary closer to China. Diplomatic relations are at a low, with Hungary often isolated in EU meetings and openly criticized by key member states. Calls for EU decision-making reform are growing, but expelling Hungary isn't legally possible. The EU faces a dilemma: keep Hungary inside as a difficult member, or risk destabilizing the bloc by pushing it out. Managing Hungary's defiance while maintaining unity is now one of Brussels' biggest challenges. The standoff highlights the fragility of the EU's internal cohesion. For China, Hungary is a strategic gateway into the EU, offering access to the single market and a friendly regulatory environment. Chinese companies benefit from tax breaks and subsidies, making Hungary a preferred base for European operations. Diplomatically, Hungary gives China a voice within the EU and NATO, blocking critical statements and fracturing Western unity. For a modest investment, China gains a partner that champions its initiatives and counters accusations of predatory economics. The BRICS bloc welcomes Hungary's interest, seeing it as proof of their growing global appeal and a challenge to Western dominance. Russia values Hungary's dissent on sanctions and continued energy cooperation. Eastern powers present their partnership as one of mutual respect and non-interference, contrasting with the conditionality of the West. Hungary is a test case for the BRICS vision of a multipolar world order. Hungary's pivot to China and the BRICS is one of Europe's most significant geopolitical shifts. What began as economic diversification is now a full strategic reorientation, challenging the EU's core principles. Orbán's government is betting on a multipolar future, seeking prosperity and sovereignty by balancing East and West. The economic data is clear. Hungary is deeply integrated with the East, even as it remains legally bound to the West. This dual identity is increasingly hard to sustain as global competition intensifies. The EU struggles to manage Hungary's defiance, while China and BRICS see it as a strategic foothold in Europe. Hungary stands at a crossroads. Its future identity and role in Europe are at stake. The ultimate question: can Hungary keep a foot in both camps, or will it be forced to choose as alliances harden?